So I'm a two-time founder. I did a successful exit in 2010 and I did another one in 2015. The last one I did was a accounting and compliance business. Well, I learned not to do that. It was an accounting and compliance business that I helped build in Hong Kong and Singapore. And since then, I've been working and particularly working with the AI Institute, and I'm their business strategist. And so I handle all their roadmaps. So I will look at the current state of an organization, its future state, and how its people and processes will be transformed using artificial intelligence. So the last couple of months, I've learned a lot of things. We've worked on so many different organizations. We're doing one on manufacturing and farms, okay? How to bring ingredients from the farms into a manufacturing ingredient sector. And we looked at one that's doing steel fabrication, a company in Brisbane, and a couple of companies in the US who are in the IT consulting space for banks. So I've learned a lot of things along the way, and that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. My presentation is in two parts. I'm going to start with the easy part first. The more difficult area is going to be the case studies towards the end. But what I'm going to start you on is three age-old problems that all of us have been facing since the inception of the first company, the British East India Company, around the 1600s. And since then, all of us in this room and all the companies have been going around in one long sort of circle with these three problems. And the only people who can really solve them are the Fortune 500 companies. But today I'm going to show you how everyone in this room can solve these three problems. I'm going to start with content creation, which is the one you can see hopefully down in the corner there in my presentation. Each of you are so bright and so creative. You come up with new touch points that you want to have with a customer. But every time you come up with a new touch point, a website, a brochure, a podcast, that just creates a problem. Where will the content come from? We want to serve customers using SMS, WhatsApp. We want to have Zoom calls with them. But how do we bring it together into a single narrative that we can understand? How do we control all of those channels into a single narrative that we can read at any one point to get a snapshot of exactly where that customer is? And the last one that's been plaguing us is trying to create hyper-personal experiences. How do we create a situation where we treat every individual, not plowing them through an all-size-fits-all customer experience, but making every customer feel like they are unique? How do we stay relevant? Doing this at scale is really hard. I mean, Fortune 500 companies reckon they can do it. It takes years and costs them a lot of money. But today I'm going to show you how Kylie, Gizmo, and Terry can do this for us. They're going to be like our heroes, okay? And before I introduce you to them and we see how they do that, I want to go into these three in a little bit more detail. I want to make sure that we really understand what's at stake here. And if you simply understand these three things and how to solve them in your company, you can switch off from the rest of my presentation. If you just get these three under your belt today, you're already light years ahead of your competitors. So I'm going to start with the first one, the content. I'm going to give you an example of a building company. They decide that they want to rebrand, they want to create a new image for themselves. They're looking at changing their corporate site. They want to introduce a podcast. But every time marketing and operations come up with the content, there's a deviation from the content and what the founder thinks the content should be like. And so what we see in marketing is we see a lot of projects, a lot of initiative, a lot of new ideas, but a lot of them never see the light of day because the project gets straddled. The founder becomes the bottleneck to the content, because the question that everyone's going to ask you is, where is the content going to come from? The second one I would like to talk to you about is this idea of the omni-channel support, the single narrative. Imagine you're a cladding company. You send an installer out to do an installation, and the installer doesn't have the installation notes with them. So they ask the customer, what did you request from the company to do the install? And now I know this is a bit of a far-fetched example, but I had this happen to me very recently with a plumber who came out to do a job. They didn't know what they were doing. They were asking me, the customer, to fill them in and explain to them what's the nature of the hot water system that had been involved. Now, as a customer, I said to them, well, look, that's not easy to answer. I mean, I sent an email. I had a talk to one of your principals. I might have had 3 or 4 different touch points. And now this person, right at the point where they're going to do the installation, is asking me to provide the summary. I mean, that's pretty stressful, right? So I'm calling head office to try and work out where this information is, because the installer is saying, I have no access to that silo. We are not omni-channel supporting. Even though we accept SMS, we accept email, they go to someone else and then those other parties can't read them. The last one I want to introduce you to is one that I think everyone as a customer has experienced. Maybe not so much in our own businesses, but I can tell you what, you've experienced this as a customer. I'm going to pick on a HR business. A salesperson in a HR company just had an awesome conversation with their client. They understand the goals of the company. They know that the type of talent this company wants to hire. Maybe they want 4 people in the next quarter. The salesperson and that customer have a great connection. And then 1 hour later, that customer is served an automated newsletter that has absolutely nothing to do with the conversation that the salesperson just had. I don't know if you've experienced that as a customer when you've had a conversation, you've gone one direction, and then you receive content that's absolutely irrelevant to the conversation that's at hand. You're shaking your head here. You've had this experience a few times, right? Now, let me put it to you this way. What it does is it trains us to ignore correspondence. So all we do, right, when we do this is we say, oh, I understand. Anything that's automated, I ignore. And then when you call me directly, I'll answer the phone call and then I know it's relevant. So as soon as we go high touch, excuse me, as soon as we go low touch, we actually train customers not to trust the communication that's low touch. And then what we also train them to do is, because they don't open our correspondence, when we need them to read something that's really important, they don't read it. So enter Kylie, Gizmo, and Terry, our 3 heroes who are going to help us resolve this. Once upon a time, these 3 problems that I was describing back here in detail, only Fortune 500 companies can solve them. We've been talking about this for 20 years. When I was back at university, they were talking about these issues. Now we can fix them. There's no more excuses. So I'm going to give you a fitness and health example here with a company we helped transform, where Kylie saved the founder 20 hours. Okay. Then Gizmo came along and increased the response rate between customers and leads by double, so 2 times it. And then Terry made the new studio that they opened profitable in 2 weeks in an industry where it takes months to get profitability. Okay. I'm going to show you how they did it. Kylie is a content creator. Every day, every morning, Kylie goes out to the blogosphere and she collects ideas, 3 different ideas she pulls together on posts that could be published by the founder, pulls them in, and then she synthesizes them through the voice that the company uses. Okay. She also does things like tracks customer profiles. In a moment, what you can see is that she's not just scraping information and bringing it in and then helping to write a post, but she's actually uncovering customer profiles that the founder doesn't know about. Let me show you a demonstration of how Kylie smashes it. I hope you can read this correspondence. Wonderful. So I'm going to read it out. What's happening here is the founder's having some correspondence on 3 different blog posts, and the founder's chosen 2. One of them is really interesting. It's on plateauing. So what happens, a lot of people who are in the fitness game, they'll get to about 6 weeks into a program, they sort of start to plateau. They stop seeing results. So there are a couple of articles here, and Kylie is listening to the founder and learning which kinds of blog posts that the founder likes to go with, so that it continues to improve the ones that it does in the future. What's happening in the next correspondence, though, is really enlightening, because that's where Kylie now talks to Gizmo. I'll introduce you to Gizmo in a moment, but that's where the customer information is. Plateauing is something that's being talked about not just in the blogosphere, but is being talked about in internal correspondence with clients. So imagine now Kylie can write an article that's not only relevant to the blogosphere, to the wider world, but is relevant to their customers and their community immediately, because we can see that in the correspondence that Gizmo is looking at. Okay. What also happened is that through this discussion, they discovered this thing called the plateau risk. You see, if you plateau, your chances of switching off your subscription is very, very high. You have a high rate of leaving this organization. So if you've got Kylie on board, Kylie's doing this for you, and she's monitoring customers against different profiles, which means you can take action. You might take action to try and reduce or improve the retention of these types of customer profiles, or you might use this intelligence to go and grab customers who are leaving other health studios for the same reason. I'm going to introduce you now to Gizmo. He's more like a repository, where Kylie isn't more like an assistant. Gizmo is a database. Gizmo is solving this omni-channel communication problem I was talking about before. I'm very sorry that you can't see this communication on your screen. But what I want you to try and imagine is it's a chronological narrative of SMS, WhatsApp, email communication that is being placed in a chronological order. So we can read it and we know at a snapshot exactly what's going on with this customer right now. And you can do this with Gizmo, okay? Gizmo can do this. It takes your VAs 3 hours to compile this information. When you have a problem with a customer and you're trying to understand where it went wrong, it can take hours to compile this information, but Gizmo is doing it in real time. We're rolling Gizmo out to a law firm. Let me show you where it gets very interesting with a law firm. Because not only can we look at communication that's like SMS, WhatsApp, and things like that, but we can also plug into applications like Xero. So for example, I can tell you if that customer has been sent an invoice, and I can tell you if the customer has paid the invoice. And you can see it right here, invoice approved, payment confirmed. So what that means is that not only can I use this as a service delivery model. Let's go back to the cladding company that should have had this. The cladding company needed this to get the information about what the customer needed for the installation. But what we can also do now is we can give this access to our service department. Customer support can have access to Gizmo. That means if a customer rings and says, there's no installer here, they can say, well, you haven't paid. And I can see that here. I can get the information within a couple of seconds. I don't have to go to the finance department. I don't have to go to Xero. The information is right here in one narrative. I can see it. The law firm is taking this to the next level. They're now plugging it into their billing system where they're allowing time stamping. See, what happens is that they lose money every time they write you an SMS. Or write an email. They don't count the number of SMSs, or they don't know the amount of time that's being. Gizmo is now going to track the time, and then we'll pass that to Xero to make sure that every increment of all the activity that's going on in the business gets billed. Someone's going to pay. What I want to highlight to you is Gizmo is taking over here your phone calls. So what it does is it collects a transcription. Okay, it takes a transcription of your phone calls, your Zoom calls, your SMSs, form submissions. It'll take the raw audio and the raw visual as well, and Gizmo will keep it in here for you. But where it gets really intelligent is when it spits it out to allow automated reporting. Talking to Mario, guy from the law firm. He sat down and explained this to me, what happens. Every time they have to do a Zoom call with a client, they then have to do a manual report. Someone has to sit there and write a recap email, right? That's the 3 salient points that you need to understand as a client from the call we just had. Or I'm going to send you an audit report. As part of that free Zoom call, I delivered a service to you and you will get a piece of asset, a PDF that's important to you, okay? This slide deck, this very slide deck that you see here that I'm presenting to you today was created as a combination from Gizmo and Terry. We can create personal, hyper-personal slide presentations for your salespeople. You'll see in a moment how Terry does this. So what's happening is Gizmo is going to talk to Terry and allow Terry to deliver that hyper-personal experience that you've been dreaming of. And they're all going to do it without you. So we've got recap email, audit report, slide decks, summary sheets, and Terry has got all of that under control. So let's meet Terry now. This is now back at the fitness club. So Terry's talking to Sarah and said, hey, how did you go with your first session? Now, remember, Terry helped make the next studio profitable within 2 weeks. All the competitors can't do it in months, okay? And what Terry is doing is he starts a conversation. What did you do? Well, she answers, I had a yoga session. So what happens is Terry talks to Gizmo to get context because we've had correspondence before with this client. But Terry is also talking to Kylie because Kylie has the customer profiles. How do we treat people who bought yoga, who want to do yoga? They want to be treated differently than the people who want to do resistance weight training. They don't want to listen to information that's not relevant to them. So the conversation we just had here with the yoga lady, see, that's Sarah, is remarkably different from the next conversation we're having with Marcus, because now Marcus is saying, hey, I just had my first session at the gym studio and I used the resistance weight training. And now I'm going to have a very, very different conversation with them. Hyper personal conversations that you simply could not have done before. You can't do this at scale unless you've got a lot of money. This is an interesting one. We can use Terry as an internal resource. Okay. So here what's happening is I need a custom deck like the one that I've created for you here. Okay. A form submission has come in. I'm going to be meeting a client in the next day. And then what Terry is doing for me is this. Terry has a master deck, but we're not going to, marketing has given us one deck to work with, one deck to serve all. But what we have, Gizmo has got 30 or 40 different case studies, different ways of our business has had success at the AI Institute. Okay, we've got 50 case studies that I can just pull up like that. Now, with those case studies, Gizmo looks at the form that comes in and says, I know which case studies. It's a retail client. Here's the problems that are occurring. These are my suggestions about the case studies we need to inject and build in this custom slide deck. The custom slide deck, which takes 4 hours to build, is built within minutes and sent to me. Here it is right here. Send it. Sent. Here's another one. Mario is now actually trying this out. So Mario had 15 minutes before a call. He's going to meet his client and they're settling on a property. That's Emma. Mario's got no idea what's been going on. In fact, Mario is so busy, he has no time to open up Gizmo. So he calls up Terry and he says, what the heck is going on with Emma? Tell me what's going on with her account. Here's the summary. Let me read it for you. So before earlier, I said that we can create a summary sheet. If I just back up here. There it is there. There is no limit to what you can design. Only your creativity can hold you back. Because what happens here now, in this conversation, he's got 15 minutes. He can't read all that information. His brain will not process what Gizmo will give him, but Terry can process it at hyper speed. So what he says is he's saying to you, look, we had the last contact Wednesday, in-person meeting, 45 minutes, outstanding. The trust deed must be signed. Invoices done, payment pending. We even can have a sentiment measure on how happy or unsatisfied the customer is at the moment. And further down, he asks a question about what's her key concerns. She needs the trust deed executed before the settlement date. She's flagged it twice by SMS. Need to get it done. 3 hours it takes to compile all this information to try and pull that together. He's estimated that Gizmo tied up with Terry will save him 2 hours every day doing reconciliations across all the different accounts, like all SMS, email, etc. Okay, 2 hours converted into production across 5 people. He's set to add $200,000 in annual billings, and we haven't even improved the factory yet. We've just cut out the waste from the admin. Now, where it gets really interesting and remarkable, in my opinion, is when they start talking to one another. Now, I don't fully understand just yet the power of this. And I don't know, excuse me, I don't know that there's enough data out there to even tell us this, but let me explain how it works. When two human beings talk to each other in an organization, it's incredibly inefficient. What happens is we don't know when to time our communication to the other person, and then we don't know if the other person read it properly. Now, you need to understand this fundamentally because there's so much waste involved in this, but it's so microscopic, this waste, that you can't calculate it. But I tell you what, when we switched this on, it was incredible because there is no person involved now between Kylie, Terry, and Gizmo. They are communicating perfectly in real time between one another with no human being required to get in the way of this. So you're talking, in my opinion, about super productivity. I mean, this is productivity that we've just never seen before. We've switched one of these on and it's just incredible. Okay, so far what I've given you is a couple of ideas around saving time, saving money. And they're the reasons why you might do what I'm suggesting, but I'm going to give you a couple of other reasons. 20% of those who come to us and talk to us at the AI Institute are talking about succession planning. They said the only reason I'm interested in AI and automation is because I want to de-risk myself and my key people against the business. Okay, so they're thinking about succession planning. Another really good reason is increasing their valuation. Many of them believe if they move from being a human first to an AI first organization, they can move from say 2x to 3x or 4x the valuation of their business. Some of them are telling us that they want to increase prices. Take Gizmo, for example, right? Rather than necessarily improving your product or your service, if you just plug in Gizmo, if you just did that one thing, that cladding company, let's assume for a moment that its service, its product is just as good as any other cladding company in the room. Okay. The only difference might be Gizmo, because that headache that that cladding company created for me as a customer, if there's another cladding company out there that can support omni-channel, I'm going to work with them as a customer and I might pay a premium for that. Lastly, it's about the opportunity to serve new profiles. Kylie uncovered new profiles that we as an organization didn't know. And what we're seeing is as an organization, we can gather another 10, 15% in revenue per annum just by serving a customer profile that our competitors have missed. There's one more. It's not on the board. It was introduced to me the other day. Mario told me about it. And he said to me, actually, I don't care about any of this. I don't care about AI. I don't care about automation. I don't care about saving time and money. He says, I just want to come to the office and have a coffee. Now, let me explain that out, right? What does that really mean? Because I was sort of scratching my head going, okay, well, have a coffee, all right. He says, look, I'm that under the pump I can't sit down and just have a cup of coffee and be left alone. I'm being interrogated by my people internally. I'm being hit by court cases externally. I open up my email, it just explodes with admin. And there is no space for this man to have a cup of coffee. So he says, I'm not interested in any of this. I just want to come to the office and enjoy myself. That's all I want to do. I said, great. So there's a lot of reasons why you want to do it. And it's not just, saving time and money. It could be these, or it could be what Mario thinks. Okay, so I'm going to explain a little bit about how we work with people like you in the room, and I want to help you get started with your journey in artificial intelligence, okay? Think about yourself and then your time that you spend, and I want you to think about containerizing yourself, okay? It's a little bit like, it touches on, and there's a parallel between this and a digital twin. So if you've heard about the digital twin, what I'm describing is a movement towards the digital twin of yourself, okay? So what you're doing is every day, every hour, you're writing down in Google Calendar. So you open up your phone and you open up in your calendar and you record your movements about what you're doing. If you're doing administration, write in administration, but make sure that every action, every task that's being done is being recorded on your calendar. And then over time, right, what we can then do is we can group them and we can put them into different containers and we can begin to understand where your hours actually go, right? So is it going into accounts payable? Is it going over into, work that you're doing, writing blog posts? Where does it actually disappear? And then from there, we can create roles. And that's where we can train these assistants that I've been describing in a sandbox. So the way it operates is you put them into an isolation, much rather like the way you hire someone. I like to think about it as hiring a person. So once we understand what the role is, containerize you successfully into a couple of assistants, what we can then do is we can then write a job description. I want you to imagine that you're hiring someone to come and work for you. You're writing a job description. So for example, if I'm hiring an ops person to do a lot of operational matters and SOPs in my company, okay, I might say, well, I need somebody with 15 years experience. I want them to be across lean startup methodology. They must be across agile methods. And that's going to become part of the training that we're going to do. And in this sandbox, we need the person who's got the subject matter experience because we can't teach people when we ourselves don't understand the subject matter. So if it's accounts payable, probably need someone from the finance department to teach them. So when you're containerizing your time yourself, it can be for you, the people in this room, but you can do this exercise with your key staff. So a lot of what companies are saying now is they're saying, listen, as part of your KPIs for your executive team, we need 2 assistants for each of you in the next 6 months. I want to see 2 assistants. So it's coming from the top down like that. And they're following this process. So they're training them in a sandbox. They're gathering the training data, their experience, and then we're going to teach this new hire, Kylie, Terry, whoever you're hiring, how to do the role. Lastly, we're then going to release them into the org. Here, once you're happy with them, that they deliver value directly to you, they're now ready to be shipped to the AI human org chart. And this is where I believe an org chart will look like in the future, not too far away. So what will happen is, this is just an example with a legal firm. So these are the human beings at the top here: senior associate, paralegal, office manager, even the VAs, everyone that's connected, all the human beings who are connected in here. And then within the org chart, you have Kylie, Gizmo, and Terry, and how they are connected and reporting and talking to all the various people who are in the company. These are assets just like these. The difference is you only have to train them once. They're prepared to work for free. They'll work on holidays. They've agreed that there's nothing that they won't try and learn. And what's interesting here is, I know it's difficult to see it in the diagram, but this layer here of human beings is actually not really talking to Gizmo very much. Gizmo talks to Kylie and Terry because these two are quite personable, and they tend to be the people who relate internally to the rest of the organization. If you took this away, this part here, you take that part, that layer there away, you're just throwing human beings at the problem. But if you add that layer at the bottom there, and then you turn around to an investor and you say, this is actually what your money's being spent on, Kylie, Gizmo, and Terry will never leave the organization. That intellectual property that's been trained into them stays with your organization forever. It doesn't matter who leaves and comes and goes. They stay forever. Having a conversation with one of our clients, Jamie, he put it to us this way. When we first pitched to him to create a transformation, he was listening to us and he went, "Oh, I get it. I get it. You're not replacing humans. The idea is that humans will be replaced by humans with AI, and that is a far more realistic version of the future, at least for the next 10 years. That means that if you love your executive team, if you love the people in your organization as much as Jamie does, he was saying, right, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this as a morally good thing for my people, because if I don't skill them in AI, they're going to be exposed because they will be replaced by people who do understand AI. Okay. And so I think that this is really a responsible way of thinking about it. And that's certainly the way the rest of the Institute thinks about this as well. So this was very powerful for him because when he first came and approached us about this, he was really frightened that the executive team and the rest of the organization would form an opinion that they were going to be fired, that they were training bots that would eventually replace their role. And it's not the case. We need subject matter experts, and it's more likely that these AI agents are going to orbit these individuals and project them into much greater levels of productivity. Okay, so I'm going to help you get started on your AI org chart. And so what I'm going to do now for the next few moments, I think, let's see, yep, I think we'll spend a good 15, 20 minutes on this exercise. I'd like you to write down your name and your executive team, right? Just start with their names. And then I'd like you to assign one AI assistant against each named person on the sheet. Okay, so go back and think about those conversations you've had with them. There have been times where they've been frustrated, where they felt like they're doing repetitive tasks. They feel like the work they're doing is not motivating enough. Think about those times you've had those conversations with them, and in your mind, guess as to what kind of assistant you would build for them right now. Thank you. Yeah, just as we're doing this exercise here, something to be mindful of is imagine unlimited budget. The example I gave with Terry, Terry is a customer experience officer who hand writes email correspondence and SMS correspondence, absolutely out of reach for the fitness organization and the law firm. One of the clients we're working with at the moment has a series of spas. They've got a couple of different spas. They're now hiring an assistant to fulfill the role of a CFO, absolutely out of reach financially previously, but now they can do it. What's your name, sir? Ben. Ben just had a really great question, and I think it's worth just sharing it with everyone in the room. And that is that when you are looking at this digital twin, creating yourself as a digital twin or your staff and containerizing them, you don't want to create generalists. So you want to create really specific assistants that do a specific task. And that's why it's so important at the beginning of this to write job descriptions. At the moment, we're thinking at a very high level, but we've got to write job descriptions because otherwise what happens is the training data becomes so wide. When we're training the assistants, they get confused easily. So the more specific that they are, the better the result that they will have. And then what you can do is you can promote them. Okay. So I haven't seen it done yet. I know it's coming though. And it looks something like this. Let me just bring up this chart here. At the moment, they're just an assistant. So these guys here are just assistants at the moment, but we can promote them slowly and increase the amount of training data we're giving them to do more things. So I've got a couple of case studies to walk you through that are a little bit deeper than the material I gave you earlier. What we were talking about earlier was things that are age old that really belong in any organization. But these ones are quite specific. And so let me walk you through these and we can talk about them. Okay, so the first one I'm gonna pick on is a HR company that we worked with, and one of the things you've got to realize about this HR company is that their consultants were spending the majority of their time on pre-screening calls. Okay, so if if you need to put 3 candidates in front of a client, you might need to make 100 pre-screening telephone calls to find out whether or not the person's going to be a good fit. That process of the pre-screening call would take this organization between 3 and 4 days, and it's highly unscheduled. It's really difficult to get hold of the candidate. Sometimes it wasn't convenient, and the information all had to be manually logged over the telephone while the conversation was occurring in real time. So what we suggested is that in order to free up more time, if we did go through a transformation, what would they do with the extra 3 days? And so what they told us was that at the other side of the process, they lost 3 to 4 days at the beginning, but at the end, and what Will was talking about, high value, was when they actually talked to their client. And what they were doing was when they would send the candidates to the customer, the client to look at, they spent absolutely no time, zero time packaging the candidates. That was the most important interaction that they need to worry about. But by the time they got there, they had no time and they're exhausted. So we said, okay, if we can get rid of this 3 to 4 days, could you spend that time and create a really amazing experience for the client where we don't send CVs, we'll send another asset, we'll create a completely new asset to sell these candidates in. They said, yes, I can do that. It'll work. And this is how we did it. So this is their current state. You can see manual calls. Over here, you can see they're manually calling. They're losing candidates because the best candidates are running away and going to somewhere else because the process takes too long. And they're frustrating their client because the client is sitting there waiting, twiddling their thumbs, thinking, why is all this admin taking so long? I want to see what the candidates are. So what we did was we introduced outbound, or in fact, rather than making an outbound call, we're now asking the candidate to make an inbound call and talk to artificial intelligence, voice recognition. Okay, we figured out that candidates will get together and they will spend, say, 30 minutes in candidate mode where they'll apply to many, many different roles. And while they're sitting there at their computer, if they applied for one of the roles in this HR firm, they receive an SMS. And the SMS reads, hey, thanks very much. We've got your application. Would you mind participating in an online call? All you have to do is click the number below. There it is there. Put in the code so we can identify and verify who you are. And we're going to take you through an automated pre-screening call using artificial intelligence. And so what happened was within what took 3 to 4 days, they could close out their entire book in 24 hours. All those human beings who were previously running around making outbound calls are now doing this thing here. They're doing that part at the end where we package up the candidates to the client so we sell something into them. Just go back there. One of the things that is for me that's important is in this transformation, sometimes what will happen is we will see things that we never anticipated. One of the things that they used to do is they would sift through the CVs and they would decide, because they've only got the manpower to make 50 calls, they would decide using pattern recognition, their brain, which of the 50 of those CVs they're going to call. Maybe they made good decisions, maybe they didn't. But now that there was no human beings involved in the process, we could actually connect with every single person who applied for the role and do a pre-screen. So rather than pre-screening only 50 candidates, we pre-screened 500. And what we discovered was is that rather than only having 3 candidates to give the client, we now had 10. And so what they were doing was they would sneakily keep 7 of them up their sleeve and say, I'll sell 3 of them, but if the client doesn't like that, I've already got 7 sitting right here in redundancy, ready to go out of the factory. They had never even thought about that before. We didn't even anticipate this. So this was all very simply by introducing the artificial intelligence to do the voice recognition and then the AI to do the analysis and provide the shortlist. They spent all their time doing the client presentation. That's all they were working on now. Okay. So the results was 3 to 4 days shaved off, and we're looking at the screening process improved and increasing the candidate client experience because we've shortened that period for both the candidate and the client. Thanks very much. You've been a great audience. You've had really, really good questions. Some of them I've answered, some of them you've answered, some of them Rory's answered. Thank you very much.